Hi, in this video we're going to be talking about technology and the price of healthcare. So healthcare costs are rising faster than inflation. We talked about this earlier on in the semester. In 1960, the typical American spent 1/20th of her income on medical care. More recently, the American spends about one out of every $6 of their income. And overall, in the economy, one out of every $6 of the economy is spent on medical care. Healthcare expenditures are rising over time. The percentage, as a percentage of GDP, healthcare expenditures have been increasing, even as GDP itself has been increasing over that period as well. So when people talk about healthcare costs, what they're really talking about is expenditures. And expenditures includes both the price and the quantity of care. And there are different hypotheses to explain rising healthcare expenditures. It could be the prices part of it. It could be that quantity demanded has increased. And it could also be that about technological innovations. So we're going to discuss each of those. First of all, the quantity of care demanded could be increasing. An aging population because people consume more medical care as they age, the aging population can be associated with increasing aggregate demand in healthcare. And a richer population, the same thing. As people's income rise, they tend to demand more medical care. It's a normal good, as it's called in economics. So that could be a source of rising demand for healthcare. More insurance coverage, because that reduces your out-of-pocket price of care, and also an increasing quality of medical care. It's better now. There's more that they can do to you when you go to the hospital, so you're more likely to want to go there because you could actually get something out of it. So if rising costs are due to rising demand, then increasing healthcare expenditures isn't necessarily a bad thing because people aren't necessarily worse off. But if the rising costs are due to rising prices, those rising prices do harm consumers because they won't be able to get as much healthcare for each dollar when the prices are higher, or they'll have to use money for other things towards healthcare. And prices of medical care could be rising because, for example, there could be increased resource costs. Let's say if the price of energy is increasing, it'll be more expensive to turn on the lights and to run a hospital. If there are less competitive markets with hospital mergers going on, there is less competitive pressure on prices. That could cause prices to rise without necessarily there being an increase in the quantity demanded. And also expensive new technology. If modern medical care is more like incorporating more expensive technologies like MRI machines for services that used to not include that service, then the price of treating an ailment will increase. So inflation measures how much more it costs this year to buy the same thing we bought last year. And that's true in general price inflation, and that's true for the medical care sector more specifically, where we have a medical care consumer price index, or a medical care CPI, which measures the changes in the price level for medical goods and services. The medical care CPI has consistently been higher than overall inflation over the past 30 years. So you can see in this graph, the dashed line at the top is medical care, and on the y-axis, it's the annual percentage change in prices. So in the 1980s, year over year, medical care was increasing by 6%, its prices for the same bundle of goods and services. And even as it moves up and down together, medical care is always greater than all goods, which is always greater than, let's say, clothing, as an example. So the medical care CPI is calculated similarly to the general price CPI. You have to create kind of a representative bundle of goods and services that approximates typical consumption of goods and services demanded. So in the general price inflation, they will literally be like, let's go to Sears and we get a size 8 boys pants in jeans. And they just get that same pair of jeans every single year and see how much prices have changed. That plus like an apple and just different random stuff. And the same thing is true in medical care. So we want to take kind of a representative bundle of things that people might get. So maybe a one-night stay in a hospital, and a wheelchair or something, and see from one year to the next how the prices have changed for the same quantity So just to kind of work out how that is calculated, let's say that there's only two goods, kind of like I just described with the wheelchair and a one-night hospital stay. So you have the quantity of these goods, A and B, in this bundle. You have yesterday's prices and you have today's prices. P0 is yesterday's prices and P1 is today's. So the index, you can just kind of plug it in here. You just want the price of today times that quantity plus the price of today times the quantity of the other good divided by yesterday's price and quantity for each of those goods. And if that price index rises by 5%, that means that consumers are 5% worse off because everything that they wanted to consume is 5% more expensive. Now, the problem with this index is that from one year to the next, especially in medical care, we're not necessarily consuming the same bundle of goods. So blood transfusions are now much safer than they were 50 years ago because of the way that they are able to screen the medicine for the blood for different kinds of diseases. So we are consuming a lot more blood transfusions. Polio vaccines have now replaced the iron lung. So the quantity of goods and services that we had yesterday don't necessarily reflect what we're going to buy today. So it's hard to use that to measure changes in prices. Just as an example, think about the cure for Hodgkin's lymphoma. Before 1950, there was no cure available. The price is essentially infinite, and the quantity is zero. But now, in 2013, there is a cure available. The price is finite. The quantity is positive. So the price has fallen dramatically. But how are you going to measure the price change over time? It's kind of impossible. So that's it for this video.